Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Pushing ahead now, reminding you to keep up on Tarpley.net, keep up on Twitter, Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter. The creedal passion periods of Samuel Huntington evoked this past week by George Will the Shill, in his Washington Post column. He claims that these are all anti-government and that the Tea Party is the most recent. Well, first of all, the Tea Party is a complete fiction. There is no Tea Party. This is completely gone. These are now Republican operatives, Republican think tanks, Republican institutes, lobbying firms, PR companies, all cashing in on the money. And the money comes from the Koch brothers, and DeMint and Bachman and Palin and the rest of them are all getting this money. And obviously Dick Armey is cashing in too. So this is the usual exercise in venality. But when we look back at the biggest of all the creedal passion periods, which is left out, notice, for Samuel Huntington, the creedal passion period is the Revolution, Jacksonian, Progressive, and 1960s. Hey, what about abolitionism and the religious revival associated with that, and then the struggle for the Union? Was that anti-government? How come it created what some writers have called the Yankee Leviathan, the stronger federal government? Also, the other big one left out is, of course, the New Deal. Poor Samuel Huntington missed the New Deal in his survey of American history. Well, sorry, Sam, and sorry, George, because the Tea Party is essentially non-existent. It's simply atrophied into nothing, and we followed it through the sociological studies, interestingly, of the Washington Post, that the people who were part of this have either dropped out, gone back to local social life and skits, or they've been hired or whatever. But that the idea that this is an ongoing mass movement, this is a complete illusion being fostered by the controlled corporate media. Now, we do have the Angelides Commission. The, official name is the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission. This just came out, between yesterday and today, so I haven't looked through this completely. Blame on Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, blame on the Federal Reserve, blame on Greenspan for deregulation, blame on Bernanke. It's all fine. It's very weak, though. And above all, the central question of derivatives is not as central as it needs to be. We're told that in the text of the report, the vast derivatives market, AIG an example, amplified risk throughout the financial system by multiplying any losses. Investors and officials could not tell how leveraged and undercapitalized some firms have become. Another quote from the report: the existence of millions of derivatives contracts of all types between systematically important financial institutions, unseen and unknown in the deregulated markets, added to the uncertainty and escalated panic, helping to precipitate government assistance to those institutions. Now, there's a cover-up. Derivatives. The deregulation that made this possible is not so much anything to do with subprime mortgages or real estate, but it is that immense, crazy castle, that house of cards of $1.5 quadrillion of derivatives, featuring, above all, collateralized debt obligations. That is what destroyed Bear Stearns, destroyed Lehman Brothers, destroyed Merrill Lynch, destroyed the entire banking community, including Citibank, Bank of America. Special case of AIG, destroyed by credit default swaps. The other ones all CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. And in the excerpts here in the Washington Post this morning, we don't read anything about collateralized debt obligations. We'll look through that again, but this is not the final word. And, of course, the Republicans say it's wrong to say that this could have been avoided. Well, it could have been avoided by regulation. Don't privatize Fannie and Freddie. Keep them as government agencies, and don't deregulate derivatives, which were banned in the United States from 1936 to 1982, and then took another decade or almost 20 years to rehabilitate them after that. But now, let's, in our final segment here, let's look backwards, right? The way to look at current events, of course, is always one eye on the past and one eye on current events, and then what kinds of results can we get? As soon as we have this orgy of austerity, right, this austerity psychosis that we're seeing in the United States today, the austerity psychosis takes us back to the period of Weimar Germany, and in particular to the government of Chancellor Heinrich Brüning from 1930 to 1932, and this was the time then when the basis of the Hitler seizure of power was laid. I wanted to evoke Weimar a little bit here at the end. Good book to read. Hans Mommsen, Mommsen, Hansmommsen, The Rise and Fall of Weimar Democracy, University of North Carolina Press, Chapel Hill, 1996. So what does he talk about here? You begin to read these things and you wonder whether you're reading about today or then. Is it history or are you reading the newspaper? We're talking about Germany 1930 to 32. In the light of the steady decline in tax revenues, every effort to fund public budgets turned into an increasingly futile race for time. Brüning and the president of the central bank refused to heed the warnings of the experts. Wilhelm Lautenbach, a good man, of the Ministry of Economics, for example, pointed out that the continuous decline in public investments, combined with the decline of prices below production costs, was bound to accelerate the downward spiral of the economy. But Brüning did not realize that the only remedy for the deepening economic crisis was for the state to prime the pump. And, of course, as Lautenbach said, not just by consumer spending, but by capital goods spending, the kind of thing that the Republicans are now mocking. Let's see, a couple of other things here. Let's talk about the crisis of local governments, right, from California to Illinois to New York to every city. During the period of stabilization, the second half of the 1920s, during the period of stabilization, municipal governments had gone into excessive debt and frequently financed long-term investments with short-term loans. In this respect, it is important to remember that they bore the principal burden of the profound changes that had begun to take place in the structure of German society before the war, and of improving an economic infrastructure that in Germany had not kept pace with those of other developed industrial nations. Under the conditions of crisis, the municipalities increased a further increase in their social responsibilities and had to deal directly with the problems of mass poverty at the same time that their own finances were adversely affected by cuts in the social budget and by the elimination of government subsidies for the construction of public housing. Sound familiar? I would say that's pretty much what we have going on today. A couple of other examples. The austerity decrees of Brüning, cut and gut. The cuts mandated in all areas, with the exception of agriculture, were particularly drastic with respect to salaries and wages in the public sector. Not including the elimination of benefits, these cuts amounted to a 20% reduction of salaries in the public sector. So what does that mean? A lot of these people then became either communists or Nazis. Let's see what happens this time around. And again, this similar crisis. Since states and municipalities were virtually prohibited from contracting new loans, the result was an austerity psychosis that only further increased unemployment. The more you rant and rave about debt and bankruptcy and Greece, you create an austerity psychosis that only further increases unemployment. Austerity measures were particularly harsh in the personnel-intensive educational area, where they affected adult education, public libraries, the public school system, and last but not least, the universities. That is to say, universities that were public institutions in Germany at that time. So you get the idea. Austerity doesn't work. The more you cut the budget, the bigger your deficit will be. That's what Brüning found, that's what Schwarzenegger found, and that's what Ryan will find. But Ryan has to be stopped because we don't need to do that particular experiment again, right? You don't have to commit suicide on every cliff in the world to know that it's not good to jump from large heights. So we don't need Ryan, we don't need Obama, we certainly don't need Bachmann We need to go back to national credit, job creation, national infrastructure. You know the routine. And we'll be back next week on World Crisis Radio. Keep in touch in the meantime on Twitter, Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter.